The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind, the kind that settles over a dining room when the wine is good and the conversation is easy. This was different. This was the silence of 100 people trying not to be seen watching something they couldn't look away from. 2 police officers walked through the front doors of my restaurant on a Saturday night in November, past the hostess stand, past the wall of black and white photographs I'd hung myself the week we opened, and into the middle of a dining room I had spent 10 years building one plate at a time. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to step outside." I remember the exact weight of that sentence, how it landed on my shoulders like something physical. I remember the way every fork stopped moving, the way a woman at table 12 set down her glass so carefully it didn't make a sound. I remember thinking, this cannot be happening in my own restaurant. Somewhere behind me, I heard heels against hardwood, moving fast, and a voice that had spent 62 years learning exactly how to sound wounded in public. "Officers, thank God you're here." I didn't turn around right away. I couldn't. Because some part of me already knew that whatever happened in the next 60 seconds was going to decide the rest of my life, and I needed one more breath before I found out who I was going to be on the other side of it. The officer's hand hovered near my elbow. "Not touching, not yet. Someone needs to leave this property tonight," he said. I looked at my staff lined up along the kitchen path like they'd forgotten how to move. I looked at the dining room I'd designed with my own hands, the tables I'd sanded myself, when the contractor ran 3 weeks behind. I looked at my husband standing very still, saying absolutely nothing. And I thought about how a person builds an entire life, brick by brick, decision by decision, sacrifice by sacrifice, and how it can still, somehow, come down to a stranger in a uniform deciding whether you belong in the place you built. I want you to sit with that feeling for a second, because before I tell you who they were talking to, I need you to understand how I got there. If you're new here, welcome. I tell stories like this one every week, stories about the moments that quietly reshape a person's entire life. If that sounds like something you need right now, go ahead and hit subscribe, because trust me, you'll want to hear how this one ends. Now let me take you back, 5 days earlier. Before any of this happened, before I knew exactly how alone I really was. I'd been awake since 5:40 that morning, the way I'd been awake since 5:40 every morning for the last decade, going over the week's reservations in my head before my feet even hit the floor. Saturday was going to be our biggest night of the year, a private dinner for 40 of the city's most influential names, the kind of night that either cements a restaurant's reputation or quietly ends it. I'd built Camden Vine from a 500-square-foot lease with a broken walk-in and a landlord who didn't believe I'd last 6 months. 10 years later, it was the flagship of 4 locations across Chicago, and I still walked the dining room every single morning before service like I was seeing it for the first time. That's the part nobody understands unless they've done it themselves. The restaurant wasn't just a business, it was proof. Proof that the girl who used to count out grocery money in quarters could build something that mattered, something permanent, something nobody could take away from her, the way things had always been taken away growing up. I never told people that part. I never told people a lot of things. I never told anyone, for instance, that the beautiful brownstone market I lived in was paid off entirely through restaurant profits. Or that 18 months ago, when Mark's investment portfolio collapsed under the weight of 3 bad decisions and 1 dishonest broker, I was the one who quietly wired the money that kept our name off any public record of failure. He thought he'd recovered on his own. He thought the market had simply turned back in his favor. I let him think that. I let everyone think that, honestly. Mark's family had old money once, the kind that built libraries and got streets named after them. And even though most of it was gone by the time he was born, the image of it never left. His mother, Beatrice, still moved through the world like the money was sitting in an account somewhere, untouched, simply waiting for the right occasion. I never corrected her. I told myself it was kindness. I told myself Mark needed his dignity more than I needed credit. Looking back, I think I was protecting something else. I think I was protecting the fantasy that if I gave enough, sacrificed enough, stayed quiet enough, I'd finally have the family I never had as a kid. The kind that shows up for you. The kind that defends you. I didn't know yet how expensive that fantasy was going to be. Beatrice called Thursday evening, and I should have heard it in her voice. That particular brightness she gets right before she does something she knows I'll hate. Sarah, darling, I decided we should celebrate as a family this weekend. I've invited a few friends to join us at your little restaurant. A few friends. I found out later she meant 15. Beatrice, Saturday's fully booked. We've had that private event on the calendar for 2 months. Oh, I'm sure you can make an exception for family. A pause, sweet as poison. Family always comes first, doesn't it? I told her no. Clearly, kindly, but clearly. I explained the deposits, the staffing, the 40 guests who'd planned their evening around us. She said, of course, in the tone of a woman who has already stopped listening. I should have called Mark right then. Instead, I told myself it wasn't worth the fight. I told myself she'd forget, or back down, or find somewhere else to make her point. I have never been more wrong about anything in my life. Saturday night, they arrived at 7:15. 15 women in furs they didn't need in a heated restaurant, laughing too loud, taking up the host stand like it belonged to them. We're the Whitfield party, Beatrice announced to my hostess, a 22-year-old named Priya who had worked for me since she was 18. VIP section, please. I'm so sorry, that section is reserved tonight for a private. I said VIP section. Beatrice's smile never moved. Tell them Beatrice is here. I watched it happen from across the room and I felt something cold slide down my spine. Priya looked toward me, searching for direction, and for one terrible second I hesitated. Not because I didn't know what to do, because some old, tired part of me still hoped that if I handled this gracefully enough, quietly enough, it would simply go away. I walked over myself. Beatrice, this section's reserved for a private party tonight. I'd love to get you and your guests a table in the main room. It's beautiful in there, I promise. Sarah. She said my name like she was correcting a child. We didn't come all this way to sit in the main room. Her guests were watching now. Smiling politely, the way people smile when they sense a show is about to start and don't want to miss it. I understand, I said, keeping my voice level, but I can't move a confirmed reservation. Beatrice tilted her head and something shifted behind her eyes, something that looked almost pleased. It's so sweet, she said, loud enough for the room, how he lets you play pretend with his money, but the adults are talking now, dear. A few of her friends laughed, uncertain and quiet. My chest went tight. Not from the insult itself. I had absorbed worse from her over the years, but from how effortlessly she said it, like it was simply true. Like everyone standing there already agreed with her. I looked for Mark. He was 10 feet away, drink in hand, and he had heard every word. I watched him look at his mother, then at me, then down at the floor. Mark, I said, quiet enough that it was just for him. A little help. He walked over, but not toward me. Toward the space between us. Mom, come on, let's just. He rubbed the back of his neck. Sarah, can we not do this right now, in front of everyone? Not Mom, that's not true. Not Sarah built this restaurant, not one word in my defense, just, can we not do this, as if I was the one doing something. Something in me went very still and very quiet, the way things do right before they break. Sure, I heard myself say. I have a kitchen to run anyway. I turned and walked away before either of them could see my face change. The kitchen was loud and bright and mine, and I stood at the pass for a moment just breathing, letting the noise of it hold me up. Behind me, through the little round window in the door, I could still see them. Beatrice, laughing again, already seated in the VIP section, like she'd never been told otherwise. Mark, standing beside his mother's chair, nodding at something one of her friends was saying. 10 years, 18-hour days. Every dollar I'd quietly funneled into keeping his pride intact and our marriage looking whole. And when it actually mattered in front of actual people, he had chosen the version of peace that cost me everything. I pressed my palm flat against the steel counter and made myself breathe. I didn't know yet how much worse the night was about to get. I only knew that something had just changed between us, quietly and permanently, in a way I wasn't sure could ever be undone. I gave myself exactly 4 minutes in that kitchen before I made myself walk back out, 4 minutes to breathe. 4 minutes to remind myself that Camden Vine had survived worse than one bad night, burst pipes, a health inspector with a grudge, a sous chef who walked out mid-service during restaurant week. I told myself this was just one more thing to manage. I didn't know yet that Beatrice wasn't finished. I didn't know she was only getting started. When I pushed back through the kitchen doors, the first thing I heard was her voice, pitched just loud enough to carry. No, take that back. We want the 09, not whatever this is. Honestly, does anyone here know what they're doing? She said it to Devin, one of my best servers, a father of 2 who'd been with me for 6 years. He was standing there holding a bottle he'd selected specifically for her table, and I watched him absorb the insult the way good staff learn to. Face still, eyes down, already reaching to take the bottle back. Something in me hardened. Devin, that's fine. Leave it, I said, walking over. Beatrice, that's one of our best vintages. I picked that list myself. Well, clearly you should let someone with a more refined palate handle it next time, she smiled at her guests. Sarah's very talented in the kitchen. Wine, though, that's never really been her strength. A ripple of polite laughter moved down the table. I felt my face get hot, and I hated that I felt it, because feeling it meant she'd landed the hit exactly where she wanted to. I'll get you the 09, I said evenly, and walked away before she could say anything else. That was the first mistake I made that night. Not the wine. The retreat. Because Beatrice didn't experience my patience as professionalism. She experienced it as proof. By 8:30, she'd stopped pretending to ask for things and started simply issuing them. She waved down a busser and told him to move the family from table 6 because the light's better here for photos. She told Elena, my pastry chef, who'd come out personally to check on a dessert allergy, that she didn't need to hear the whole speech, just bring the plate. She informed Priya that the music was entirely wrong for the room and that someone should change it immediately. Each time an employee looked at me. Each time, I intervened quietly, correcting the situation without raising my voice, without giving her the scene she seemed to be hunting for. I kept thinking, if I stay calm long enough, she'll run out of things to push against. I was wrong about that too. Marcus, my general manager, finally reached his limit around 9. He'd worked with me since the second location opened, and he did not rattle easily, which is exactly why what happened next mattered. He walked up to the VIP table with the kind of steady, professional calm I'd trained him for. Mrs. Past? Whitfield, I want to make sure your evening's going well, but I do need to ask that requests go through your server, so we can keep the kitchen running smoothly for all our guests tonight. Beatrice set down her glass. Excuse me, do you know who I am? I do, Marcus said, and I still need to ask the same thing of every guest in this room. I don't think you understand your position here. Her voice dropped into something colder. I could have you removed with one phone call. You're welcome to speak with me about any concerns, Marcus said, but I don't report to you. Beatrice turned toward Mark, who had been standing near the bar the entire time, close enough to hear every word and far enough to pretend he hadn't. Mark. Are you going to let this man speak to me like that? And Mark, my husband, the man I had quietly protected for a decade, walked over and said, Marcus, come on. Can we just be a little flexible tonight? For my mom? Marcus looked at me, waiting. I could have stepped in right then and backed my own general manager, publicly, the way he deserved. Some tired, hopeful part of me still believed that if I gave Mark one more chance to correct course on his own, he would. It's fine, Marcus, I said instead. Thank you. Marcus nodded once, professional to the end, and walked away. But I saw something in his face I hadn't seen before. Not anger. Disappointment. In me. That one hurt almost as much as anything Beatrice had said all night. The check came out just after 10. 40 guests, top shelf everything, 3 rounds of dessert wine Beatrice had ordered without checking a single price. $11,200. I watched Marcus set the leather folder in front of her, and I watched her look at it the way you'd look at something mildly distasteful someone left on your porch. Oh, we don't need this. She slid it toward the center of the table. Owner's family doesn't pay. Mark, tell them. Mark didn't say anything. He just looked pained, like a man watching a car accident happen in slow motion from the passenger seat. Marcus, to his credit, held his ground. I'm sorry, but restaurant policy doesn't include a complimentary dining exception for family. Then change the policy. Beatrice smiled at her guests like she was letting them in on a joke. I'm sure Sarah doesn't actually make these decisions. That was the moment something in me went quiet and very, very still. Not angry, past angry. Somewhere colder and clearer. I walked over. Beatrice, I do make these decisions. And the bill stands. The table went silent. 15 women in furs watching me like I'd just done something scandalous by defending my own business. Sarah. She said my name like a warning. Don't embarrass yourself. I'm not paying $11,000 for a dinner. I never agreed to host, I said, keeping my voice level. You're welcome to settle the bill or we can discuss payment plans, but this isn't complimentary. For the first time all night, I watched something flicker across her face that wasn't performance. Real surprise, she hadn't expected me to hold the line. Not in front of an audience. Not when it would cost her the appearance of victory she'd built the entire evening around. She recovered fast. Something almost admiring flickered behind her eyes, the way you'd admire a dog that finally learned to sit. You've always been talented at cooking, she said loud enough for the whole table. It's just unfortunate you confuse running a kitchen with owning one. Then she stood, smoothing her dress with both hands. Fine, she said. If that's how you want to play this. She pulled out her phone. I genuinely thought she was calling a cab. Yes, hello. I need someone to come to Camden Vine on Halsted. Her voice had transformed completely. Softer now, trembling at the edges, the voice of a frightened, delicate older woman. There's a former employee here who's become extremely aggressive with myself and my guests. She won't leave us alone. I'm honestly quite frightened. The room around us seemed to tilt. Mark's head snapped toward his mother. Mom, what are you? She's refusing to let us pay a reasonable bill and she's threatening my family. Beatrice continued into the phone, calm as still water. I have 15 witnesses. I stood there, and for one strange, floating second I couldn't tell if I was more furious or more disbelieving. Because every word out of her mouth was false, and she knew it was false, and she was saying it in a voice built entirely to make the truth irrelevant. My own voice came out steadier than I felt. Hang up the phone. She didn't even look at me. I turned to Mark. This was it. This was the moment. Surely, a man watches his mother lie to the police about his wife and finally says something. Mark, I said, say something. Tell them she's lying. He looked at me, and for one heartbeat, I saw it. I saw that he knew. He knew every word coming out of his mother's mouth was a lie. I watched the knowledge sit behind his eyes like something too heavy to lift, and then he looked away. Sarah, please, let's just wait and explain it to them when they get here. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. Not she's lying, not my wife would never, not one word of the truth. I just watched him fully understand. Something inside my chest didn't break so much as it simply closed, quietly, completely. The way a door closes when you finally accept nobody's coming through it. I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining. I stopped, for the first time in 10 years, waiting for either of them to choose me. The sound of sirens reached us maybe 6 minutes later, faint at first, then closer, threading through the noise of the dining room until every conversation in the restaurant had gone quiet listening for it. Guests were whispering behind their hands now. A woman near the window pulled out her phone, filming without even trying to hide it. Priya stood frozen by the host stand, eyes wide, watching me like she was waiting for instructions I didn't have. Beatrice sat back down, smoothed her napkin over her lap, and looked, for all the world, like a woman entirely at peace. She believed she had already won. I looked at her. I looked at Mark, standing there useless and pale, still hoping this would somehow resolve itself without costing him anything. I looked at my staff, my people, the ones who'd stood in that kitchen with me through 6 years of 18-hour days, watching their owner get quietly erased in her own dining room. And then, without a word to anyone, I turned and walked toward the back hallway. "Sarah?" Marcus called after me, alarmed. "Where are you? I'll be right back," I said, and I meant it as calmly as it sounded because for the first time all night I actually knew exactly what I was doing. My office was small, tucked behind the walk-in, door locked the way it always was. I closed it behind me, and in the sudden quiet, I could still hear the faint wail of sirens getting closer through the wall. I knelt down in front of the safe bolted into the floor of my closet. The one Mark didn't know the combination to, the one nobody but my accountant and my attorney knew existed, and I spun the dial with hands that had finally stopped shaking. Inside were the documents I'd spent 10 years quietly gathering, 10 years of protecting a truth nobody in that dining room had any idea existed. I pulled out the folder. And for the first time since Beatrice walked through my doors that night, I smiled. I walked back into the dining room holding a folder instead of a weapon, and somehow it felt like the same thing. The two officers were already at the VIP table, notepads out, listening to Beatrice with the particular patience people reserve for someone they've decided is the victim. She'd rearranged her whole posture, smaller now, one hand pressed lightly to her collarbone, voice pitched to tremble just enough. "She's always been unstable," Beatrice was saying as I approached. "Ever since the divorce rumors started, we've tried to be patient with her. There was no divorce. There were no rumors." I felt the lie land and didn't flinch. The dining room had gone almost completely still around us. 40 private event guests at their tables. 15 of Beatrice's friends, frozen mid-conversation. Marcus had drifted to the edge of the room, close enough to hear everything, arms crossed like he was bracing for one more disappointment. Priya stood by the host stand, no longer looking to me for instructions, looking instead at Beatrice, like she already sensed how this was going to end. Devon had stopped mid-stride between tables, a water pitcher still in his hand. Even Elena had come out from the kitchen, wiping her palms on her apron, standing in the doorway where the whole room could see her watching. Every one of them had spent the last 3 hours watching Beatrice treat me like an intruder in my own building. "Ma'am." The younger officer turned toward me, hand resting near his belt, not threatening, just careful. "We're going to need you to step outside." There it was. The exact sentence I'd been waiting my whole life without knowing it. "I understand," I said. "Before I do, I'd like to show you something." I opened the folder. "This is the Certificate of Formation for Camden Vine Holdings, all CA," I said, laying the first document on the table between us. "Filed 9 years ago. Sole member, Sarah Camden Whitfield. Camden's my maiden name. This LLC owns the building we're standing in, along with the business operating inside it." The older officer picked it up, read it slowly. His eyebrows moved, just slightly. "That doesn't mean anything," Beatrice said too quickly. "Paperwork gets filed under all sorts of names for tax purposes. My husband did that constantly. You're welcome to verify it with the county recorder," I said. "It's public record." I set down the second document. "Property deed, same LLC, filed the same week we closed on this building." I set down a third. certificate of occupancy. Fourth, our current business license, renewed every year, always under my name as sole proprietor and managing member. The officer with the notepad had stopped writing and started reading. Beatrice's smile hadn't moved, but something behind her eyes had. A flicker. The first crack in 10 years of certainty. "This is absurd," she said. "Mark, tell them this is your family's restaurant." Every head at that table turned toward my husband. Then, one by one, so did the heads at the surrounding tables. I felt the whole room lean in around us, 40 strangers and 15 socialites and my own staff, all waiting on one man to say something true. Mark stood there for a long moment, and I watched him do the thing he always did, search the room for the version of the truth that would cost him the least. Except this time there wasn't one. "Mark." Beatrice's voice sharpened. "Tell them, Mom," his voice cracked on the word. I've never actually seen the paperwork." "Sarah handles all of that." "Because she works for you," Beatrice snapped. "Because you were generous enough to let her build a career while—" "I don't think that's true," Mark said quietly. The room went very still. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic. It was just a man, finally, admitting out loud what he'd known for years and never once said. And even now, even here, it came out as an apology to his mother instead of a defense of his wife. I heard someone at a nearby table exhale, an actual, audible breath like they'd been holding it since Beatrice first sat down. Marcus's jaw tightened. Priya's eyes went wide and wet. I felt something in my chest that wasn't quite relief. Too late to be relief. But it was something. The older officer looked up from the documents. "Ma'am, do you have identification matching this LEC filing?" I handed him my driver's license, Sarah Camden Whitfield. He held it beside the paperwork, checking the name against the filing, and I watched a decade of my life get quietly, officially confirmed by a stranger in a parking lot, issue uniform under fluorescent light. "This checks out," he said to his partner. Then to Beatrice, "Ma'am, you told dispatch you were the property owner's family being harassed by a former employee." "I am family," Beatrice said, and for the first time I heard real panic underneath the composure. "That's not what you told dispatch," the officer said evenly. "You said an unstable former employee was refusing to leave the premises." The wealthy women at the table had gone very quiet, a few exchanged glances. I recognized the look. It was the look of people recalculating who they'd been laughing with all night. One of them, an older woman near the end of the table, actually pushed her chair back a few inches, like she wanted the record to show she'd never been that close to Beatrice in the first place. "There's more," I said, and I pulled the second folder. I hadn't planned to go this far. If I'm being honest, I'd planned to establish ownership and let the officers sort out the rest. But something about watching Mark finally tell a half-truth, and watching Beatrice's face when the ground started shifting under her, something made me keep going. "Mark," I said, "do you know whose name is on the mortgage for our house?" He looked at me, confused. "Mine, ours." "It's mine," I said, "paid off, actually, 18 months ago." Restaurant profits. I turned the next page. This is a wire transfer record from that same month. $400,000 moved from Camden Vine Holdings into your investment account 3 days after Fairmont Capital collapsed and took your portfolio down with it. The color left Mark's face entirely. "You never told me that number," he said, barely audible. "You never asked how you recovered," I said. "You just believe the market turned back in your favor. I let you believe that. For 2 years, I let everyone believe that, because I thought protecting your pride was the same thing as protecting our marriage." I looked at Beatrice. "And this," I said, laying down the final document, "is the corporate account attached to the platinum card you've used at every dinner, every trip, every event for the last 4 years. It's the company expense card. Camden Vine Holdings has been paying that balance in full every month since I authorized it." Beatrice actually laughed, a short, brittle sound with no humor in it at all. That's not Richard set that account up for me years ago. Richard passed away 6 years ago, I said gently. I kept it active because I didn't want you to lose the life you were used to. That was my decision, not a debt you were owed, a kindness I chose to give. I turned to my phone and dialed my who I texted the moment I left my office. 2 rings. Diane, deactivate the Whitfield family card effective immediately. Revoke all authorized users on every company account except mine. A pause. Yes, now, please. Beatrice reached for her purse with hands that weren't quite steady, pulled out the platinum card like she needed to physically hold proof that it was real. This is mine, she said, to no one in particular. This has always been mine. The younger officer looked at me, then at her, then back at his notepad, and something in his posture changed completely. He was no longer standing between 2 disputing parties. He was standing in front of a woman who had knowingly lied to emergency services in an attempt to remove the actual property owner from her own building. "Ma'am," he said to Beatrice, "I'm going to need you to step outside with us. Excuse me? You provided false information in your call to dispatch. That's the property owner." He nodded toward me. "You are currently on private property that you don't have authorization to occupy, and the owner has the right to have you removed." I watched every piece of Beatrice's face rearrange itself in real time in front of every single person who had spent the evening watching her humiliate me. Confidence into confusion. Confusion into disbelief. Disbelief into something rawer than either, something that looked, for just a second, like the frightened woman she'd been pretending to be all along, except now it was real and nobody was performing anything. Around the room, I could feel the current shift. A few of the 40 private event guests had actually started to clap, quiet at first, then not so quiet. One of Beatrice's own friends looked down at her lap like she couldn't bear to watch anymore. Marcus's arms uncrossed. Priya pressed a hand over her mouth. Devin just stood there, still holding that water pitcher, grinning like he'd forgotten he was supposed to look professional. "Sarah!" Her voice had lost every ounce of its earlier certainty. "Sarah, surely we can discuss this like—" "It's so sweet," I said, my voice carrying now, steady enough that every table in that dining room heard it, "how he lets you play pretend with his money." "But the adults are talking now, dear." I watched the word land exactly the way hers had landed on me, 5 days and a lifetime ago. She didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. The officers walked her out through the center of the dining room, past every table, past every guest who'd spent the evening watching her humiliate me, past the wealthy friends who were already gathering their coats and finding sudden reasons to leave separately. One of them wouldn't even meet Beatrice's eyes as she passed. The woman by the window who'd been filming earlier was still filming, except now her phone was pointed the other way. Nobody stopped Beatrice to say goodbye. Mark stood by the bar the entire time, watching his mother get escorted out of a restaurant he'd just learned he had no legal claim to, married to a woman he'd just learned he'd been financially dependent on for years. He found me afterward near the kitchen doors, the dining room slowly exhaling back into something like normal around us. "Sarah, not tonight." I wasn't angry when I said it. Just done, in the particular way that comes after a very long day. "I'm not doing this tonight. I need you to know I didn't know. About the mortgage." "The investments, I know you didn't know," I said. "That was the whole plan, Mark. I made sure you never had to know. And somewhere along the way, I think that turned into you never having to choose me either." He didn't have an answer for that. I'm not sure there is one. "Go home," I told him. "We'll talk when I'm not standing in the middle of my own restaurant." Marcus found me a few minutes later, hovering near the pass with the particular careful energy of a person who witnessed everything and doesn't know what to say about it. "You good, chef?" I looked out at the dining room. Guests were talking again, quieter than before, but talking. Devin was pouring water at table 12. Priya had already reset the host stand like nothing had happened, because that's what good people do. They hold the room together while everyone else falls apart. "Yeah," I said, and meant it in a way I hadn't expected to. Let's get back to service. You sure? I thought about that question longer than it probably deserved. For 10 years, I built this place while hiding half of myself to keep other people comfortable. Tonight, for the first time, I stood in the middle of it and let the truth take up all the space it needed. I'm sure, I said. Fire table 9's entrees, let's finish the night. The kitchen came back to life around me the way it always does. Orders calling, pans hitting the flat top, the particular chaos that has always felt more like home to me than anywhere else. I picked up a ticket and got back to work, because that's what I'd always done, and because, for the first time and longer than I could remember, I wasn't doing it to prove anything to anybody. I was just doing it because it was mine. If this story meant something to you, hit subscribe, because I've got a lot more of these moments when the truth finally catches up to the people who thought they'd never have to face it. I'll see you in the next one.